Do you ever find a brand new show that you're really excited about and you're really loving, and then all of a sudden it gets canceled?
No!
I feel like that happens to me all the time, so I want to make a video about those tragic injustices that I highly recommend you check out because I love these shows. I think that they're worth watching even if you only have a couple of seasons to watch. No, it's not a definitive list. So let's get into it. Now I have divided this list up as to when they got canceled. So let's start with those 11 shows that got only one season. Now the hardest part about these particular shows is because they only get one season, basically you just get enough to get a small glimmer of potential. So you get a small character arc, a minor introduction into the plot, and then boom, nothing else. A lot of these end on cliffhangers, and a lot of these are maybe the saddest, biggest injustices that I have to talk about because coulda, shoulda, woulda. You know what I'm saying? So let's start this list off right with one of the classic big examples. That's, of course, Joss Whedon's Firefly. So you know I couldn't have this list without this particular show on the list. Now what made this show so special is that it had a particular aesthetic. The idea of a space western is something that does particularly well on TV. On top of that, we also have an incredible cast that had insane chemistry. They all got along. You could really tell how much they loved working with each other, or how much fun the writers were having exploring all of the different characters. There was quite a lot of humor, but there was also some deeper themes. What is not to like about this series? It did finally get a conclusive movie, but if anything, that movie made me realize how truly awesome further seasons would have been. Now the next one on this list is also another tragedy, and that is gonna be one that did it opposite of Firefly. It started with a movie and became a TV show, and that's gonna be Limitless. Now, there is a movie that features Bradley Cooper about this very idea that there is a new illicit drug that goes out on the market that creates super intelligence. The problem is that the side effects of this drug are really intense, maybe very deadly. Now this movie was a really interesting one, and I think it made for an okay watch, but what they did with taking it into a TV show and creating a new main character was really interesting. I loved the idea of a guy who is trying to help the CIA with their cases and needs and addicted to this drug, but then it has some very big side effects. And there's quite a lot of layers in this single season, and yet, of course, they didn't renew it because I don't think they did a really good job of marketing it. So very, very sad about this show, but definitely worth a watch. The next show is one that I talked about before on my channel and is a great injustice, and that is Amazon Prime's The Peripheral. This one is based on a William Gibson book and follows a girl who enters into a VR headset type game in a very near future and discovers that this game is not what she thought it was, and goes down the rabbit hole into trying to discover not only what this game is, but why everyone is trying to kill her and her family. This TV show was incredible. It was really something special, and it was even renewed for a season 2 that never happened because of the writer's strike. Darn it. Then we have another one that is hard to find, and that is Ascension. This show had another incredible aesthetic featuring a group of people who were secretly placed on a spaceship and sent off to colonize a particular planet. They're stuck in a spaceship for many generations, and so their society is very regimented. They've taken them back to the 1950s and 1960s, and there's a lot of of drama that happens on this generational spaceship. But the TV show doesn't stop there. It actually has flashbacks to what's happening on Earth with those people who know about this secret experiment. And the cliffhanger on this one was killer. This series had so much potential that it is an epic tragedy that this one didn't go further. But you should definitely check this one out. It was incredible. Another one that's kind of an oldie but a goodie is going to be the show Terra Nova. Now this one was one that I loved to watch with my parents, and it was featuring a family of people who lived in a very dystopian world of Earth. We have lots of pollution, we have overcrowding, and the planet is overall dying. So the government decides that they're going to send people to a planet that has a lush green forest and no pollution, no overcrowding, because there are no humans. Yet their communication with old Earth gets cut off, and the lottery system may not be very fair. This one had a lot of potential, especially when they brought out dinosaurs. I'm just gonna leave that there. Go check it out. Then we have one that's a lot more recent that should have gotten more media coverage, and that is Debris. This one followed two government agents as they start to investigate these super weird cases that don't make physics sense. And it's all traced back to some alien debris. A spaceship has recently crashed in our galaxy, and the debris from that alien ship that was clearly more advanced than we are is starting to rain down on Earth and creating a lot of chaos. This show was awesome. I love the perfect combination of the sci-fi show with the investigatory cases and the government conspiracy. This is kind of my vibe, you know, kind of X-Files-ish, and I really loved the two partners they had here. I don't understand why they just didn't give the show a little bit more of a chance. Then we get into a spin-off series that I think was unjustly canceled, and that is the spin-off series of Battlestar Galactica known as Capra. I'm not really sure about spin-off series in general because sometimes they really screw them up, but every now and then they get them done right. And Capra took place as a prequel before the events of Battlestar Galactica happened, before humanity was conquered by AI. And I think it was a really interesting idea of how the Cylons were planning this takeover. It was a really interesting series, and I feel like it wasn't given a fair shot into discovering what it wanted to do and what direction it wanted to go. I really liked this one, and for those Battlestar Galactica fans out there, you should definitely go check this out. Next was one that made me feel like I was the only one that liked it, but that can't be because the show was awesome, and that is a single season show of Defying Gravity. This show featured a team of astronauts as they trained and then also were sent out on a very specific mission with NASA. Now, of course, we have a lot of TV shows that kind of cover this topic. However, Defying Gravity really started showing that not everything was being revealed, and that maybe their mission was a lot different than what they expected. Now, of course, the show was canceled before we found out what it was, but there were a lot of really interesting, thrilling mysteries that were placed inside the show that really had quite a lot of potential. Next on the list is one that's just a little bit more fantasy than it is science fiction, and that is one called The Irregulars. This one featured a group of kids who all have very interesting kind of magic powers, I would say, and they end up getting discovered and hired by Watson. That's right, Sherlock Holmes Watson. This entire show takes place in Victorian era times, and it was a really clever, interesting show, kind of implying that Sherlock Holmes also had dealings with the magical elements of Victorian London. And I loved the show. I thought the characters were just coming into their own. And then of course it got canceled. Next on the list is gonna be one that is also a book that I haven't gotten to yet, and that's gonna be Flash Forward. This one is a really interesting premise and sadly only got a single season. I guess I'm gonna have to get to the book pretty soon, but this show features a particular day where a bunch of people just have a whole section of time that they don't know what happened. However, because they were sort of like dreaming during this state, not only are they trying to figure out why this happened, but what happened during this time frame, and everyone who went unconscious during this time frame seems to have had little visions of what their life would be like in the future. And we can see how these little glimpses of the future affect different people's lives in different ways. And it's a really cool concept, a super interesting idea, and I guess I'm gonna have to go pick up the book because it really left off on a really cool premise. Finally, last in this section, but certainly not least, is going to be the show Away. This one features Hilary Swank and also features a working mom type situation who is also an astronaut. And with great media concentration, she decides to leave her daughter and her husband at home to go on a mission that she in particular believes in. And throughout the series, she's constantly struggling with this decision, even though she has clearly already made it. And there's quite a lot of reveal as to what this mission is and why she would leave her family behind. I thought this show really was ahead of its time in dealing with motherhood and whether or not it is ethical to go back to work or not. And this show had lots of potential, but I guess I was the only one because apparently it got canceled. Now let's get into those shows that got 2 seasons, but still got canceled. Now the great thing about season 2 is that usually the plot gets significantly more revealed, and the characters are more than just falling in love with them, they're actually growing and maturing or getting worse in whatever problem they have. And this makes it for an injustice that so many of these were canceled. Sometimes it feels like if they could just get a 3rd season, I would have been happy, you know? I just tell myself that, I'm not sure it's true. But let's get into some of these shows that only got 2 seasons. Now, first on the list, I'm going to get it out of the way, and that is another Joss Whedon show, Dollhouse. This one had a really interesting premise, and I remember finding this show specifically because I didn't know what to watch after Firefly got canceled. So when I found Dollhouse, I was definitely enthralled. This is more of a psychological thriller where a couple of young people get strong-armed by a mysterious corporation into renting out their bodies to rich folks who can pay for it, and they can go do whatever they want with this particular body. There are lots of mysteries through this show, and I'm not going to cover them all, but this one was a really, really good one if you're interested in another Joss Whedon baby, but I will say it was a very different tone and a very different cast than Firefly. Next on the list is going to be another spin-off series that I think was overly hated for its time because I loved to hate these characters and loved to love them as well. And that is the Stargate Universe series. Now, I know it's a spin-off, and I know initially it wasn't the same as the other 2 shows that were in this genre, but I loved the characters. I thought this plotline was a lot more mature and advanced and gray than so many of the other shows in the Stargate Universe. Don't get me wrong, still love those, but this one, in my opinion, was the most unjustly canceled show that was in the series. I'm still heartbroken, and I'm not gonna get over it. Then we have a TV show that I stumbled upon and didn't get a whole lot of media coverage, and that is a show called Revolution. This one took place in a post-apocalyptic world where an EMP has been dropped on America, and all of technology is not working. But there are no zombies, there is no virus, and there is no giant takeover. We don't know if this is only happening in America or in other places around the world. We're only given the perspective of this small town and the characters that then go on adventures to try to figure out if they can find their long-lost uncle, who may or may not have the answers to what happened. There's a lot of interesting reveals in this show, and this one, of all the post-apocalyptic ones, felt very real and possible because there is no special virus, there is no zombie, and so it was really the question of how addicted are we to technology? The answer is very. I don't think that's a spoiler. I would highly recommend you definitely go check this one out. I really enjoyed it. Speaking of post-apocalyptic shows that were unjustly canceled, I have to talk about the show Jericho. This show features a small town, middle of USA, that all of a sudden finds out that the big cities around on the coast are bombed, and everything goes silent. And luckily, they're right in the middle of the country, so they're not getting the lethal radiation that other places might get. And this particular small town is trying to deal with the fact that they don't know what's going on, they have no way to find out, they don't know if they're going to survive, and they're not getting any kind of produce or medicine or anything else into this town. Then we have the show Dark Matter. This one isn't Blake Crouch, this one is a different one, a trope where everyone on a spaceship wakes up with no memory of who they are or how they got there. And as a group, they have to try to figure it out. Obviously, somebody on the crew deleted everyone's memory. They have to figure out who they were and why they would be deleted, as well as who was the one that deleted them. Now, I'm really sad to say that this particular series had so much potential, so much character development, so many nuanced themes, and yet it ended on a cliffhanger and it's never been resolved. Then we're gonna get into a little bit more of a modern show. This is probably the best thing the Wachowski sisters did after The Matrix, and that is Sense8. This was a really unique premise, very interesting, clever idea. We have a bunch of random characters around the world in present day that for some reason seem to be somehow telepathically linked to other people around the world that they have never met. And because of these weird linkages, they're able to kind of swap bodies or consciousness, or at least borrow each other's specialty. So somebody who gets in trouble in Los Angeles could borrow the martial arts skills of somebody who was in Japan, or vice versa. This one really had a lot of potential. There were so many cool ideas in this one, and I think it's a really shame that we didn't get to explore what the ending would be in season 3. Now let's get into a couple of tongue-in-cheek parody comedy shows that I think really deserve another chance. The first one is going to be one I've talked about on my channel already, and that's of course Seth MacFarlane's Orville. This one is a parody of Star Trek, and I have really been enjoying it. While the first season was a little bit more parody satire and a little bit more over the top with the comedy, the second season really started getting good by starting to take the characters a little bit more seriously and starting to delve into a lot deeper topics. So I really have lots of hope that this one could come back, but Seth MacFarlane has, I guess, done lots of interviews saying that he is overbooked and doesn't have time for it. So I can still hope, right? Next is gonna be probably a controversial pick, and that's gonna be Avenue 5. That's right, they picked actor Hugh Laurie to be a figurehead captain on a luxury space cruise liner that ends up getting into significant trouble. And guess what? He doesn't actually have any captain skills at all, and it becomes very apparent. This is a very ridiculous show with a very dark comedy style that may not be everyone's taste, and of course the quality started going down in the second season. I kind of get why it was canceled, but I kind of also really loved it. I don't know. Just so you know though, it's not House in Space, so don't expect that. Then I have 2 more on this list to finish it off, and these are both really old shows that still need to be talked about today. The first one is going to be another spin-off series, and that is the Sarah Connor Chronicles. I really loved this one because I thought that while the Terminator movies were great action flicks, I thought that the character development in the Sarah Connor Chronicles really started to get good. We really started getting a lot of reveals about the new world that was coming, and also Sarah Connor herself. There were some really good plot points in this one that I'm really sad were absolutely canceled. The other show is one that if you were around, you know. And that one is Heroes. This was the big show right after Lost. I mean, season 1 has an addictive quality that is just incredible. Every episode was fantastic. This is about a group of people that developed magical powers, and not all of them are good. Not all of them know how to control these powers either. This show was, so perfect. And season 2, while it gets a lot of flack, is still good. The reason why this show ended up fading into oblivion is I guess there was another writer's strike and other temporary writers got hired in and they didn't know where the show was going, so things kind of all fell apart. It's a really tragic story for such an incredible series. I wish they could post-publish a book as to how it should have been or how they were planning on making it, because it had so much cool story in this particular one. If you're a big fan of The Boys or other superhero shows, maybe you should check this one out. Well, that does it for all the shows that were canceled for season 1 and season 2. I just want to briefly mention a couple of shows that were given more seasons and yet still canceled. The first 2 shows both had 3 seasons long. The first one is going to be Defiance. This is an old school one that also had a video game tie-in, and it focuses on the story of a father and his adopted daughter. And this one does have kind of a space western but on Earth futuristic vibe. I really loved it. This show had so many nuanced themes, and it's probably the show that I would most recommend to those fans of Firefly. Next is the show Colony. This one is about a post-conquered Earth by aliens, and humans have to live in a colony. I thought there were a lot of really interesting aspects that were explored in this show, and we also had humans just being regular humans with our human drama. So there's a lot in this show to love, and I'm really sad it only got 3 seasons. Next is going to be a show that got 4 seasons, but I am heartbroken. Like, utterly heartbroken that this show got ended, and that is the show Sanctuary. This show does have Amanda Tapping from SG-1 in it, and I thought she did an excellent job. I really liked it because it deals with kind of a private yet feels like an agency that is hosting and probably trying to save a lot of fabled creatures. There are so many interesting pieces to this story, and it's definitely that trope of the secret agency that's doing work behind the scenes, and each episode is a little bit episodic, but I loved it anyway. And the last one on the list is Warehouse 13. This one had 5 seasons, and I'm still heartbroken about it. This one was a secret government agency that hired a few specific agents that we followed through all the episodes to go out and collect things that broke the rules of physics. Different artifacts or different inventions that did things beyond our understanding. And they were collected in Warehouse 13 for our safety. This one was kind of on the edge, kind of similar to Fringe, but maybe a little bit more episodic. But I really loved it, and I'm really sad that this one got canceled. So that does it for my unjust sci-fi and fantasy series that got canceled way too soon. Tell me in the comment section down below if I have forgotten any. And until next time, you guys, see you in the next video.